Well, good evening, everybody. This is Jeff Morton. I am the host of this new podcast. We're live streaming live on Facebook, Rumble, and YouTube. I think there's a problem with the Rumble feed, but we're going to keep moving. Tonight, I'm going to be talking with Pastor Mark Biltz. The little ditty that you saw at the beginning of the program is my wife's business. It's called The Body Shack Makes Sense. She makes these different types of products for your skincare kind of thing, chapstick, all those things. You can go to her website, thebodyshackmakessense.com, and check out her stuff. But tonight, the program is all about, we're going to talk about whatever the host wants or the guest wants to talk about. And tonight, we're going to be talking about the solar eclipse that's going to be happening on April the 8th. And we will also be talking about, we're going to be talking with Pastor Mark Biltz, who, I've known Pastor Mark Biltz since 2007. I sat in the audience when he introduced the blood moons, and it kind of blew my mind. But there's so many people that don't understand what this is all about, and that's one of the reasons I invited him on the show. We're also going to be talking about his new book. It's called America at War, 2024 through 2026, The Sons of Light versus Darkness. And so without further ado, let me bring on my guest, Pastor Mark Biltz of El Shaddai Ministries. Hello, Pastor Mark. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. So great to be on your program.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And as I mentioned, we've known each other for about 17 years. And so I've had the privilege of sitting kind of at your feet and learning a lot. In fact, knowing you has radically changed the way I understand the biblical text, in particular the Hebrew letters. And since your footprint is so big all over the internet, you've been doing this for a while, I want to just kind of jump right into some things that I hope you are willing to talk about. Number one, a lot of people don't understand the Hebrew alphabet. And if you could kind of explain to people why that's important to know, the word, the letter, the number, go ahead and tell the audience what that means and why it's important if you can.
Sure. Many of our letters come from the Hebrew Aleph Bet. Many people know Greek Alpha and Omega, but in Hebrew, it's the Aleph and the Bet. The Aleph and the Tav, the first two letters of the Aleph Bet, where we get the word alphabet. And the amazing thing about the Hebrew language, it goes so much deeper. It's like three-dimensional. Or it's like looking at it through a microscope and seeing the DNA of creation. Because in Hebrew, every letter is a picture. Every letter is a word. So if you have a four-letter word, you can have four words within the one word. Every letter is a number, like in Roman numerals, where V is 5 and X is 10. It's the same thing in Hebrew. So it's a very dynamic language. And as a matter of fact, when the Apostle Paul was knocked off his high horse, it says he heard a voice in heaven speaking to him in the Hebrew tongue. And so the heavenly language is Hebrew as well.
Well, now, we're going to be talking about the letter Aleph because there's some significance to what's going to be coming up on April the 8th. Why don't you go into a little bit more detail about the letter? What does that mean of the Aleph?
Sure, because it's the first letter of the alphabet, it represents God, okay? He is aloof in Hebrew means like an ox, one that goes in the front, one that carries the load. It's also the first letter of Adonai, of Elohim. So the letter Aleph represents God himself. Now, the ancient font, just like you have a lot of different fonts on your computer, Hebrew has changed the look of the font over the years. When Moses drew it, it looked like an ox head because that's what it meant. Well, about 500 years later, King David, when he wrote it, it looked like our capital letter A. So if you can imagine a capital letter A kind of turned at an angle, you can see how it looks like an ox as well. So it's the number 1. It's the picture of an ox, and it means ox. It can also mean like the commander of a military.
So now, having said that, I've sat and listened to you do 30 minutes on the letter Aleph, but there is significance to that, and I wanted to bring that out as we get more involved in tonight's discussion, and particularly with the coming eclipse. But I want to kind of talk about Theodore Herzl for a moment because I didn't know this until I read his book. I've just finished his book. And in the book, I didn't know that he had a vision that spurred his dynamic into going into all that happened as a result of bringing back the Jewish state or the Zionist state, the Zionist movement, if you will. Now, he didn't live to see the nation born again, but he had an earth-shattering vision about the regathering of the nation of Israel. You, like myself, I had an experience when I met you, actually, but you also had an experience about how to take these lunar and solar eclipses, because the Bible has a calendar. It has dates. God has a time frame for just about everything. And you learned about this years and years ago. You said you were kind of fascinated with astronomy, uh, not astrology, and that you were praying one day and something happened that caused you to, caught you. Believe it or not, you're the person everybody start looking up. Would you explain a little bit about that, please?
Yes, I sure can. Well, I love astronomy, and I like looking at when eclipses occurred. And I know Genesis 1:14, where God said he purposely created the sun and the moon to send signals. He wanted to communicate with mankind. But the problem is our calendar is based only on the sun. The Muslim calendar is based only on the moon. They're both mathematically very precise, but they're not the one God uses to communicate, because you can only have a solar eclipse on a new moon, which is why he told Israel to recognize a new moon so they would always be seeing a solar eclipse when he wanted to communicate with them, especially on Rosh Hashanah or Tishri 1. And the lunar eclipses you can only have on a full moon, which is why God had them meet on Passover and Sukkot every year, because those were both full moons. Well, according to NASA, and I like to use science, math, to come up with what I come up with. And according to NASA, over a 5,000-year time period, now that's a pretty good span of time to get a good average, you get 12,000 lunar eclipses, of which about 4,000 are total lunar eclipses. So that means over a period of 5,000 years, you only get one total lunar eclipse every year and a half. Okay, so I noticed there were 4 total lunar eclipses within a year and a half. So that is off the charts. And I was just seeking the Lord, thinking, what does this mean? Why? Here I know it has to mean something, because you said you wanted to communicate. And all of a sudden it hit me. Put it on the biblical timeline, the biblical calendar. And so I did. And then when I saw they landed on Passover and Tabernacles 2 years in a row, I thought, oh my gosh, this is Genesis 1:14. God is trying to communicate. So then my next adventure was, well, let's see if it's ever happened before. Well, then I noticed it happened at the time of the 1967 war. And then I went back and saw it happen when they became a nation. And then I went back and further. I saw what happened in 1492 when they were all kicked out of Spain. And so I thought, oh my gosh, this is so astronomical, literally, that I knew it meant something. Now, Jeff, at the time, I wasn't sure what it meant, but I knew it meant war. A total lunar eclipse means war with Israel. A total solar eclipse means war is coming to the Gentile nation that it goes over. Okay. So as I tried to figure out what it meant, I didn't really know the answer until about 6 months ago. Okay. And of the 2014, 2015 lunar eclipse. And I realized what it meant. And let me tell you this. 1967, 66, 67, 68 were these 4 blood moons. Well, that meant the 1967 war, but it meant more than that. As you very well know, I don't know if your listeners do, but there's a year of Jubilee, and the Jubilee is 50 years, and the 50th year is the year of Jubilee. According to Leviticus 25, you can only proclaim the year of Jubilee on Yom Kippur. Well, guess what? The 4 blood moons in 66 was a 7-year warning of the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War was actually the first day of the 50-year Jubilee cycle. The 2014-2015 blood moons were a 7-year warning of October 7th, the very last day of the same Jubilee cycle 50 years later, 2023 to 2023. So it's, oh my goodness, it means war. It meant Israel. And the 50-year Jubilee cycle was bookended with a war on the very first day and a war on the very last day.
You know, I really get this. Folks, I got this years ago. And for me, and I talked to Pastor Mark about this, I thought, you know, God is trying to communicate with us. I remember thinking, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that this has turned into a westernized prophetic kind of thing, as opposed to God communicating to us about some of the things that are happening. I actually, and I talked to you about this a few days ago, I think God is warning mankind of what we're about to do, because we've moved so far away from the natural order of things, whether it be in culture, whether it be in our understanding of the Bible, whether it be in government. We've moved so far away from the natural order of things that there's a natural order of consequences that follow. And I can go back to Genesis 28. We can talk about that all day long. So I think God is saying to humanity, I'm trying to warn you, because you have gotten so far away from how things are ordered that you're going to be in a place of chaos. Now, Pastor Mark, I have looked at a bunch of stuff on YouTube. I call it the YouTube prophecies. And there's some there's some stuff on YouTube that cause you to put your head down and go, my God. What makes what we're talking about with you, since you're the one who caused the whole world to look up, and I believe God told you something that you took to heart, what makes what you're trying to communicate to the world different from a lot of the chaos and crazy stuff that we see out there? You've been doing this for a long time now.
Yeah, I have. Well, I like to jokingly say we are a non-profit ministry. And I mean that both ways. What I like to do is show patterns. I like statistics. Just like a weather forecaster, they can look at the weather and know when a tornado is coming. They can forecast a hurricane is coming. I'm not prophesying what's going to happen. I'm declaring these are the facts. These are the patterns. And it looks like a Category 5 hurricane is going to be coming. And so for me, it's not a matter of prophesying as much as it is looking at the patterns and say, statistically, this is what it looks like is going to come. Not prophetically, but statistically, based on facts and history in the Bible.
Well, to that, I can absolutely, celebrate that, because I think in the Western world, we've turned prophecy into almost kind of like soothsaying,
Yeah, right.
There's so much out here. And then you got the people that said, God told me this and God told me that.
Yeah.
And I sit here and I go, well, none of that. I had somebody say to me, this is absolute goodness to God truth, that the galactic empire was surrounding the earth and they would soon restore Donald Trump to the presidency, and it would happen on a biblical feast day. And of course, none of that happened. And I was like, well, I think I need to break this relationship off. That's stuff that's out there. Now, the difference between my talking to you and having you on tonight is I get this. I absolutely get this, because statistically, mathematically, you can go through the biblical account and go, my God, there was a solar eclipse, a complete eclipse when Jesus died. Was it a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse?
Neither.
Okay, explain that. Correct me.
A solar eclipse can only happen on a new moon, and this was a full moon. And the full moons always happen at night, not during the day.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The blood moon. Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But
so it was just total miracle. It was a total miracle.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
You're right.
If you see a blood moon, it's always at night. And a solar eclipse can't happen on a full moon. Therefore, it had to be a completely miraculous thing that happened, because it lasted for 3 hours. Solar eclipses, lunar eclipses last for 4 minutes.
Right. Okay. So we can't tie that particular event to what NASA's talking about because that was unusual.
Yeah, but there were solar lunar eclipses about 2 years after the Messiah, though. And when you look at the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, completely surrounding it, like 3 years before, 3 years after, were all kinds of lunar solar eclipses on the feast days.
You know, that brings up an interesting point, because when I see the prophetic world, I call it the YouTube prophecy folks, they're all looking for some great big gigantic monstrous event, as opposed to looking at the decline that's happening at a steady pace with COVID,
Right.
with the vaccinations, with the war with Ukraine, the war with Georgia. There's a lot of things that have flipped the cultural reality that you and I grew up in.
Yep.
So it's like a gradual level of chaos.
Frog in the boiling pot.
It is, you know. So it's not one great big thing yet, but it is. There's all these different things, and the thing that I find most interesting about that is they're all happening as a result of the chaos that man is creating for himself. We're living in a world where it's crazy, and there's consequences to that. I mean, there's consequences to printing money with nothing behind it. I mean, talk about our economy crashing. People don't realize the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion, other than an extra zero. So I like to put it this way: 1,000,000 seconds is 12 days. 1,000,000,000 seconds is 33 years. That is huge. But 1,000,000,000,000 seconds is 33,000 years. It's only been 6,000 years from Adam. 1,000,000,000,000 is 33,000 years worth of seconds. And we're $34 trillion in debt. And then they say we're going to go $1 trillion in debt every 100 days now. We have nothing but funny money. We are going down the economic toilet probably by the end of next year. I mean, the world doesn't realize we're playing with monopoly money. There's not even a board to sustain it, and it has to have. It's not sustainable, and I don't like that word sustainable, but it can't happen. So again, I think God is saying, "Listen, I'm sending you these things in the sky, these signs, to let you know that you're heading for a collision course with disaster." And of course,
totally. And do you know what just happened with the Maersk giant ship that hit the bridge in Baltimore? Did you hear about that?
I'm aware of the story. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Do you know what the name of the bridge was?
Yeah, the St. Francis Key.
Yes, who wrote the national anthem or Star Spangled Banner. And the very few hours after America betrayed Israel in the UN Security Council, abstaining, forcing them to try to have a ceasefire, hours later, the Star Spangled Banner national American anthem went down that bridge.
See, people, you know, I so get that. I didn't make that connection, but I remember when the Twin Towers came down, you know, collapse, destruction, the number 11. And I go, God, you're using all the accoutrements that we've created for you in this world to show us this stuff. So that's interesting. I never made that connection. Now, there's people in the world that are going to go, you people are nonsense. But they don't understand, and they don't understand that God has a unique way of communicating with us. He doesn't sit on the top of a mountain every day and with a bullhorn. He uses what is created to let us know. And that's straight out of the historical account of the Bible, because these things that happened back then, they would have everybody in the ancient world would have said, this is the hand of a God, whether it be the God of Israel or a God. So their entire motif would have been, look what God has done. He's angry with us, because that was a mythological world. So now when we see those things happening today, we don't think of it based on the way the Bible was written thousands of years ago. We look at it all from a scientific perspective. Go ahead.
There was a total solar eclipse over Nineveh 3 months before Jonah arrived. It's recorded. It's in history.
Now, what about that? I mean, because you've got people saying, oh, it moved across Salem, and when it came out of Oregon, and then it got to Canada, Nineveh. You have a little different thing about that. Would you explain that, please?
Sure. A lot of people are saying there's too many Ninevehs. There's not that many Nineveh, and they're adding some that are several states away just to make it equal the number of Ninevehs. But the amazing thing, you have the one in 2017 that went from Oregon down through Carolina. Right a week after October 7th, there was another annual solar eclipse that left Oregon down through southern Texas. Okay, this is forming that letter Aleph, because now you have the one going from Mexico up through Canada forming the bar of the capital A. And so before you count that one, you have just an X, which is the Tav, which means God's signature. Right. Now with the other one, you have the Aleph. You have both the Aleph and the Tav over the United States. And where it intersects in southern Texas is in an area known as the Texas Triangle, the #1 human sex trafficking in the entire United States. And within that Texas Triangle, you have a city of Jonah and a city of Nineveh. They're both there. Then when it goes through southern Illinois to cross to one 7 years ago, it intersects. Like the letter X. Yes. It intersects an area known as Little Egypt. And they even had slaves back then. And the amazing thing is there's cities all around it with Egyptian names for the cities: Karnak, Thebes, Goshen. And the university there in that area has a pyramid and the god Horus for its logo. And the total solar eclipse on April 8th on the biblical calendar is the first day of Nisan, which is also the very same day as the initial plague of darkness that happened 35 years ago. And, so it's like, this is not, coincidence, because Nisan 1 is the very first day of the religious biblical calendar. God told Moses, this is the day you're going to start from. And it's the very day Moses' tabernacle was set up and the glory fell. To have this eclipse happening on Nisan 1, intersecting those particular two areas, this is, America's in trouble.
Well, I was thinking about Exodus 12:1, where it talks about, hey, before we leave, let's get this calendar thing squared away. Yeah. It says, I want you to get the lamb. We're going to take this lamb and we're going to do this thing on the 14th day. We're going to kill it. But you guys got to make sure that everything is perfect about it. And I'm thinking of Exodus 12:1 through all the way up. But anyway, it mirrors the day that Jesus or Yeshua rode into Jerusalem. He was inspected by Caiaphas. He was inspected by Herod. He was inspected by Pontius Pilate. They found nothing wrong with him. On the 14th day, they killed him. He was put to death. And I sit here and I go, you learn about that whole thing based on the biblical calendar. If you understand the biblical calendar. Right. I also like to think about Joshua 4:19. They come up out of the Jordan River on a feast day. It was Passover. But if you don't know what the festivals are, and if you think, everybody says these are the Jewish holy days. Well, God gave them to the people of Israel to teach.
It's his calendar.
His calendar. And so
even Esther. It was on Passover that she fasted for 3 days and 3 nights. And then she rose up the same time Messiah rose up and appeared before the king. I mean, come on.
The same thing is true with Abraham. When he says the two people come, he says, go make a meal. We're talking about the Passover meal. But if you don't understand the biblical festivals, you won't make these connections to God's calendar. I like how you used to say, when I sat in the audience there, if the doctor tells you to be there on Tuesday, and God tells you to be there on the first day of Passover, you're probably going to miss the appointment. And I really appreciate the fact that the world is paying attention to the biblical calendar now, but also the biblical festivals and the fact that they're lining up with these solar eclipses. I mean, I'm reminded of Herzl being given a vision, and then the whole of Israel began to look at reestablishing the Zionist state through government. You looked at the biblical tetrads and the festivals, and you begin to tie them to the biblical calendar, and now the whole world's looking up. But they're not looking up because it's a marvel. They're looking up because believe it or not, in the last 17 years, the whole world's talking about the biblical festivals and the lunar and solar eclipses as a result of what God inspired you to do. Now, because a lot of times we've talked about this. The people say, well, Pastor Mark made a prophecy that the world was going to end. And he said that the world's going to collapse and we're going to have all these different things. I know you because I've sat in the audience and I know you haven't done that. What you've done is maybe put out a suggestion or two, but you haven't claimed any dates. You didn't know.
That's what I said.
You were able to tie these things to the Bible in such a way that now the world is understanding the biblical calendar, the festivals, and the lunar and solar eclipses, or eclipses in general, from a biblical perspective. And I think that's what God wanted done.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't know the answer to the 2014, 2015 eclipses until about a few months ago when I saw the final war on October 7th. Then I could connect. Wow, did you believe first and last were wars? So I didn't know until after the October 7th war, but then I immediately made that connection with the 50-year Jubilee.
See, because I get this, and I really do get this, I've had this sense of dread in my spirit for a long time.
Yeah.
For the United States of America.
Yes.
And also for the church, the church and the Christian world, that we weren't taught any of this. We don't know any of this. And so I've had this dread and this, it's huge, but I'm not afraid of what's happening. I just know that terrible things are happening and they're just really getting started. I mean, COVID changed the world. COVID literally changed the world. So now before I'm going to move on because I want to talk a little bit about your book. And you've written another book. It's called The America at War 2024-2026, The Sons of Light versus Sons of Darkness. We've got it up on the screen. What inspires you to write this book?
I really wanted to warn everybody. I felt like Ezekiel, where God says, if he tells you to warn the people, you better warn the people. So I'm just warning people that like a hurricane is coming, an earthquake is coming, a tornado is coming, and they need to be prepared. Do you know, Jeff, and you may have been sitting in on this teaching, there's only been 8 total solar eclipses over the United States since we become a nation in 1776. And they occurred in the 1700s during the Revolutionary War, the 1800s during the Civil War, the 1900s during the Revolutionary War, which America was involved in. But to me, in the 2000s now, we're going to see a war, I believe, here in the United States, internally as well as externally. I believe there's going to be complete political chaos over the elections between the right and the left. I think we're going to see civil war, riots between pro-Israel, pro-Palestinians. I think we're going to see riots between pro-immigrant, anti-immigrant people, especially if they continue to cause harm to the citizens and take funds away from local governments. And then I also think we're going to see terrorist attacks like in the Middle East here. I believe because of our horrible open border policy, terrorists have come in, their cells here in America, and I believe we're going to see people blowing themselves up, suicide bombers in grocery stores, gas stations, bridges. And then, of course, all these Chinese single men with no families, military age, have come in, and many believe they'll be, they'll get and so I see our electrical grid coming down. They're going to be hacking all kinds of things. But in the midst of all this chaos, when we have no authority, we have the smallest military we've ever had. And if we don't even have an election because of whatever may happen, I believe we're going to see China attack Taiwan, North Korea attack South Korea, Iran, Hezbollah attacking Israel. We've already got the Russia, Ukraine, and America can't afford or try to back all of our allies if this all happens at once, especially if you don't have a leader.
Now, see, I know you're talking as an American citizen based on what we see happening, not as a pastor and certainly not as a prophet. The signs are everywhere. I mean, it's literally everywhere. I believe, and I had somebody tell me this the other day, not just you, because I believe the same thing. If we look at the biblical story of how Israel was really overwhelmed, it was always from the northern border.
Yes.
And, the Assyrians came through that way. Babylon came through that. And Hamas is nothing compared to what Hezbollah is. And so I do believe that Israel's heading for some amazing problems, but I also believe the Bible. The hand that moves against Israel, duck, because you're dealing with your own death and you don't know it. But I think too, because the Bible is replete with death and destruction, and in particularly with Israel. The United States of America has never had the kind of hell, if I can say that word, that Ukraine is dealing with. We've never had that kind of thing happen here.
Right.
And with our trillions of dollars of debt, the division in our country, the signs that God is warning, I believe it's a warning like you. We are heading for a calamity I don't think the world has ever seen. I really
You're
do believe
exactly
that.
right. And it's going to be global.
Citizen. Yeah, and I say that as a citizen, not as a believer. I mean, what we're dealing with in our country, the cultural decay, everything that you could possibly think of, what they're teaching our kids, the destruction of the family, these things are not sustainable. We're creating chaos in a vacuum, and there's the consequence. Something has to reset everything.
Well, and I think the problem is we are at the forefront of a two-state solution. And if you go to Joel chapter 3, verse 2, God is going to be pleading with the nations of Israel, he says, who are trying to divide his land. And if you go to Zechariah 1 is the red horse of Revelation, which is all about war. And you see in the vision, there's these 4 horns on an altar. And Zechariah asked the messenger, what are those? And he said, these are the 4 entities that are trying to divide the land of Israel. And then these 4 carpenters come who saw off these 4 horns. And Zechariah says, who are they? And he says, these are the 4 messengers from heaven who have come to terrorize the 4 entities who want to divide Israel. I believe that's the quartet that was created in 2001 with the sole purpose of dividing Israel, which is the U.S., the UN, EU, and Russia.
Yes.
Terror is coming because of that.
I actually wrote several articles about the quartet. So I absolutely agree with that. And, the sad thing is most of the Americans who just want to live and work, they're not paying attention. They're not involved.
No,
before we go any further, I want to run a clip about all of this. If you can put that up, Carol.
The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Then the Messiah returns.
Thank you for that video clip that I asked you for, because who put that together for you? I can't remember who put that. Was it Jill?
Yes, Jill did. Well, our friends in India did all the background, and Jill added the audio where I'm talking. But you know what, Jeff? The good news, I just found out today the books are coming in this Friday.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. There's a couple of things I want to ask you, because we're at 7:34, so I want to respect the 45-minute thing. I want to ask you about the books. They're coming in. I ordered one months ago, pre-ordered one. I can't wait to get it. But this book is a little different than your paperbacks. What's different about it?
Oh my goodness, this is like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It's a lot bigger. It's a hardback, and the pages are all in color. And so it's a phenomenal book. It's like a $40 book. And we're not selling it for that. As of Monday, I think it'll be $29.95 or something like that. But I'm just so excited because of the high quality. It is, and it is large print for us old folks. That's what's really nice also. It's large print.
Well, see, I've known you for 17 years now, and I know that writing the books, your passion is to get the word out, to take Torah to the nations, and to get for me, it was like to get the Christian church to go, several steps beyond where we are to kind of see all this thing. And I know that was your passion too. That's why you started El Shaddai Ministries. But you're also writing another book with Dr. Danny Ben-Gigi. Tell me a little bit about that. What is that?
It's called the Mark Biltz Bible. What we're doing, we're taking the King James version of the Bible, of the New Testament. We're sticking with the New Testament right now, and we're putting it in Hebrew. So it will be software that you can have access to with your tablet, iPad, computer, whatever, where you will be able to see the Hebrew interlinear, the Hebrew, the English, and then we're going through and correcting the errors in the King James Bible.
Well, I mean, I've always been under the impression that the Bible is inerrant, and I would say
in the original language.
Yeah, I would say that's true. It's the translations from the 36,000 different denominations that create the great big kerfuffle, if you will. So when do you expect that book to come out? I mean, this is a process, right?
Yes, I'm hoping May, June.
Of this year?
This year, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we've been working like crazy. Yeah, we're hoping to have it out. The nice thing about this, what we're doing, we're not correcting all the errors. We're starting and we're getting it out, and then you get free updates. And so it will be constantly updated for you.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. We're making a lot of changes. We're not making it like some weird Hebrew messianic Bible where no one can understand it. Okay. We're putting in, we're replacing a lot of things but it won't be so much that people can't understand it, read it, but it's going to make it come alive and seem much more authentic.
Hopefully it restores context.
Oh, yes, totally restores the context.
Now that I do know a little bit about Hebrew, I don't speak the language, but when I'm reading certain passages in the Bible that don't make any sense, I know now to go see what the Greek wrote and then see where they got it from. And I go, wow, that changes everything. It makes it different. It actually makes it simpler to understand the covenant government of God and why our behavior in covenant with God matters. Keep my commandments is not just a cliche.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It enforces order. Well, we've got about 6 minutes left. Is there anything that you really want to share with the people? By the way, you're helping me build an audience because this is brand new. You're our second show. But is there anything that you would like to pass on to whoever listens to this or watches the recording?
Well, just to finish talking about this Mark Biltz Bible, it is very much fighting replacement theology. And that's what we have to replace, the replacement theology. And that's why we're creating it. And we're showing where not only did the Greek mistranslate the Hebrew, and therefore the English was wrong, going to the original sources, because actually several books of the Bible were written in Hebrew first and then in Greek. But the problem is some of the Hebrew translators tried to take it from the Greek and go back to Hebrew rather than sticking with the original Hebrew when it was referring to verses in the Tanakh or Old Testament. So we're correcting those things as well. But I guess the main thing I would like to tell everybody more than anything is you can be at peace. You don't need to be full of fear. It's just like when the 2 spies brought the good report, the 10 spies brought the bad report. Well, guess what? It may sound like a bad report, but we're giving a good report. Look up, your redemption is drawing nigh. And so I just really want to encourage people not to be in fear over what's coming, but just to return to the Lord with everything they have.
You know, I hear your dogs, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have to go.
No, you don't have to apologize. I'm a dog lover, so I tend to look at it like this too, and that's why my website is called Free from Fear.
Yeah. Oh, great. I love that.
I look at, if Abraham were alive today, and I took him on a ride at 70 miles an hour down the freeway, he would think, my God, look at what, in spite of the wars, the chaos, the death and destruction that follows human history all the way back.
Yes,
He would
right.
look at these tall buildings. I mean, he would look at a toilet and be marveled at the fact that there's a toilet,
Yeah.
but he would still credit it to the God that he served. Look at what you've done with the hand of men. I met your dogs the other day. So I look at it this way, and in spite of the failure of mankind to understand the covenant relationship with God, the kingdom of God is still developing in the earth. Everything that is happening in this earth is scheduled, it's on time. We just don't understand that if Abraham or Moses or any one of the disciples were here today, they would marvel at what the world has become with what men have done. And I think when people understand that the destruction, death, and all those are things that we do. But we also have built nations. We've built amazing things. And I think people, Dennis Prager said the question is not why is there evil in the world, but why is there good in the world?
Yeah, exactly.
I think we lose sight of that. So whatever happens, the God that I serve still is the master of every outcome.
He's the master conductor. He's the one that leads the song. He does everything.
All right. Well, tell people how they can go to El Shaddai Ministries, your website. We got just a couple minutes left. Give people the direction on how to come listen to you.
Yeah, sure. Because every Saturday morning, our services are live streamed, and they can come to our website, El Shaddai Ministries. It's esm.us for United States, esm.us. They can go there to look at all of our teachings that are free, the notes. You can all watch them. They're all archived. And then you can also order the book there, America at War 2024. And for me, again, it's not about the money. I could care less. I want people to be warned about what's coming because I believe that's what I was created to do. I'm like the biblical weatherman telling you a storm is coming.
Well, I find that interesting. It's kind of like I've always said, we don't have the kind of prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel and the minor and the major prophets because there was no Israel. Well, now we have Israel, and God is unleashing the blood moons, the tetras, and he's making us understand why all these things are symbiotic to what he's doing. So I want to thank you for coming on and being my guest, and I'll probably see you on Shabbat on Saturday. And I just appreciate you, Pastor Mark, and I'm really glad that you came on board. Now, for the audience, we're going to have Gabriel Nadalis on next week. He is a former Antifa member. And if you want to tune in and check that out, it's going to be a live broadcast. This is Gabriel, and he wants to tell you a little bit about what's really going on in the Antifa movement. So I'm looking forward to that. Pastor Mark, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it with me. And just keep us in prayers. And I thank you very much for doing this. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And just for those that are watching, the phone number had a little switch of the wrong numbers. It's 253-862-8010.
256. Oh,
well, no, 253-862-8010.
So you can get folks. You can call the office. You can go online. You can order the book, and I would encourage you to get it soon because none of us know what's going to happen on April the 8th or what follows. And so I just believe that you keep looking up and keep asking God to take care of us, and we'll be okay one way or the other. This is Jeff. Thank you again, Pastor Mark. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate you helping out in the background. And folks, we'll see you guys next week. This is Let's Talk About It with Jeff Morton. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.